Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Meanwhile, 2 police officers have been shot and wounded in Louisville in Kentucky in protests that have been sparked over the failure to prosecute any officers over the killing of Breonna Taylor.
Right there, officer down, right there. Officer down, yes.
The jury ruled that 2 white policemen should not be prosecuted in connection with the death of Miss Taylor, a black medical worker who was shot in her own apartment, because their use of force during an ill-fated raid on her home was justified, but a 3rd officer was charged with endangering her neighbours. Street protests erupted in violence and 2 police officers on duty in the midst of the demonstrations were shot and wounded. Police said 1 suspect was arrested and the 2 officers are in a stable condition, but one of them has undergone surgery. Hong Kong police have arrested the democracy activist Joshua Wong for participating in an unauthorised assembly in October 2019 and violating the city's anti-mask law. The arrest adds to several unlawful assembly charges or suspected offences he and other activists are facing relating to last year's pro-democracy protests. These arrests have been made possible by the new sweeping national security law approved in June. Mr. Wong was later released on bail. West African leaders may lift painful economic sanctions against Mali once an interim president is inaugurated on Friday in the wake of the August 18th military coup. The bloc's envoy praised the junta's leadership choice, suggesting the economic community of West African states could accept the candidates picked this week to lead the transition of power. The easing of sanctions would be a relief for Mali, whose imports have slumped 30% since its neighbours closed borders after the deposing of President Boubacar Ibrahim Keïta. Australian officials have begun planning the disposal of the almost 400 whale carcasses stranded on the Tasmanian beaches as hopes faded there would be any more survivors. In what is thought to be one of the world's biggest mass recorded beachings, rescuers had managed to free around 70 of the long-finned pilot whales beached on the Tasmanian coast. Officials said the majority of those freed had reached deeper water, but 4 were likely to be euthanized and others might return when the tide turns. Authorities are developing a plan to dispose of at least 300 whales at sea, an operation that could take days. Argentine doctors, nurses and other medical workers have taken to the streets of Buenos Aires to protest against their government's decision to ease lockdown measures. Marching down a main Buenos Aires avenue, the protesters drew attention to the plight of healthcare workers by carrying signs with the images of colleagues who have died from COVID-19. Argentina imposed a strict lockdown in March, but has seen infections soar in recent months, first gripping the capital Buenos Aires and surrounding areas and now spreading to the provinces. Vietnamese police have raided a warehouse that was found to be recycling and reselling used condoms. State broadcaster VTV carried footage showing dozens of large bags containing used condoms scattered across the warehouse. Police said that a total of 360 kilograms, an equivalent to 345,000 used condoms, were found in the warehouse. It is unclear how many recycled condoms have already been resold. And finally, a rare Botticelli portrait could join the restricted club of art masterpieces sold for more than $100 million when it goes up for auction in New York. The Renaissance painting Young Man Holding a Roundel is one of only around a dozen of Botticelli's portraits known to survive today. The 15th century work is expected to sell for more than $80 million at auction at Sotheby's in New York in January. It has the highest estimate in Sotheby's history, and the auction house said it could well sell for more than $100 million. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.